everybody, welcome back to a tactics video, this time looking at how to use Tempestus units. This is one of a video in a series of videos looking at actually how to use Astra Militarum units, as opposed to less about the actual data sheet, but how to actually use the unit on the tabletop. I've done two other videos so far on Astra Militarum transports and also battle line units, so check out the link above. Now the key focus of this is less about the exact rules of the unit, but how to structurally overall use them, because as you know, the rules will change. A codex is due soon for Astra Militarum. This has been recorded on the 13th of December in the UK. So we've just had a heap of point changes as well, which I'll cover off very briefly. But again, the overall point of this video is to more how to use the unit overall. Hopefully this video will last over the next probably 6, 12, and 18 months. So a bit of my channel. Cover everything Astra Militarum from the lore aspect. Tactics videos like this one here, where I take a relaxed but competitive approach to 40k, and also building, painting and assembling videos. So what are the three Tempestus units we've got currently available in the Astra Militarum Index? So they are the Aquilons, and currently you pay 110 points for 10 models. It's fixed at 10. There's a Militarum Tempestus Command Squad, which is 5 models, fixed at 70 points. And then Tempestus Scions, where you get 5 models for 60 points. And as said, these have all got more expensive. The Aquilons are 20 points more expensive. The Scions are 10 more points expensive, and the Command Squad is actually the same. Now, so they've got more expensive. I won't comment on the effectiveness of these units, but overall, broadly, I believe they're still very good on the tabletop of 40k 10th edition in December of 2024. So quickly, what do these units do? Because whilst it's less about what they do, there is some pretty fundamental differences in what these units can do. So the Aquilons essentially have got one special weapon, one sniper rifle, and they've also got a servo weapon. And the overall impact of them is they can do less damage than their peers in the other two data sheets. Now the key thing they can do is a 6-inch deep strike. Yeah, so they can come in 6 inches and deep strike, as opposed to currently other units can deep strike 9 inches. This unit can 6-inch deep strike, which is very powerful. Of course, this has changed. Previously it was a 3-inch deep strike, which was a bit over the top for your opponent, but now they can 6-inch deep strike. And when they do so, essentially their servo sentry weapon, which can be either a flamer, hotshot volley gun, or grenade launcher, can fire essentially twice. So it comes in, fires, go to the shooting phase, it can fire again. Yeah, so Tempestus Aquilons, their key thing is a 6-inch deep strike. Yeah. Okay, now the Tempestus Command Squad, they basically can be attached to the Tempestus Scions, and their jam basically is you can take 4 special weapons, which will have to be separate and different. And then the key ability is basically the Tempestus Prime. He gives sustained hits 1. Now there's other loadouts you can take. You can take things like regimental banners, voxcasters, and also med packs, just like you can in other command squads. So you can make it into a true command squad. But typically the current school of thought is to make it sort of a special weapons platform. So you can bring 4 special weapons and also a plasma pistol on the Tempestus Prime. So the key focus on that unit in the top right is basically the sustained hits. Then the Tempestus Scions down the bottom, you can bring in either blobs of 5 or 10 to 60 or 120 points. If you bring 10, you can have a plasma pistol on the boss man. You can have a power fist. You can then also have 2 plasma and 2 melter, or 2 grenade, 2 flamers, but typically the current school of thought is plasma and melters. Now, with the 5-man or 10-man Scion squad, this then sort of double clicks into what you actually want to use it for. Yeah, because if you're going for a 10-man squad, you're typically going for damage output. Yeah, if you go for a 5-man squad, it will do a bit of damage output, but then also open up for potential play to basically be sacrificed for engage or fronts. Maybe deploy locus in your opponent's deployment zone, or basically just be used around the board more for sort of mission play, less about damage output. Now their key ability, the Tempestus Scions, is they get organic reroll 1s to hit. And if your opponent is on an objective, you get full rerolls. So this is very powerful, and do take note that this is both in the shooting and also the melee phase, the fight phase. So when the boys get in there with their fists, and also the power fist on the sergeant, you're getting full rerolls on an objective in the fight phase as well, so that's helpful. Now, obviously, you can link these two together, so you can make essentially the Scion Death Blob, is what I like to call it. It is a big investment of points. So if you go 10 models, it's 130 points. But if you go 15 models for a 10-man Scion squad and the command squad, that now is 190 points. So it is materially an investment. Now, obviously, when you do that, the rules combine. So you get 4 rerolls if your opponent's unit is on an objective, and then you also get sustained hits. So it can get very, very spicy. And also, given the Tempestus Prime is a officer, when they come in from deep strike, he can then give our unit an order. So typically you give the unit he's part of an order, which often will be +1 to hit, with 4 rerolls potentially, with rerolls, or rapid fire. So you get rapid fire 3 plasma guns. So when you do that combination there, you basically have got 15 models with rapid fire 3, 4 rerolls on the objective with sustained hit, so that can get a lot of damage output. Yeah, so again, the three units here we've got currently in the Codex, which are deep striking Tempestus Scion units, Tempestus units. Aquilons is a movement block. Command squad is basically for sustained hits, or you can play them as a true command squad. And then the Tempestus Scions are either a 5-man mission play unit or part of a mega blob which attaches into the command squad. Now, one other unit to mention which can't deep strike is the Taurox Prime, basically the dedicated tank for the Tempestus Scions, and I'm choosing not to focus on that unit because it can't deep strike, essentially, yeah. So that's what we've currently got. This is the current point as at mid-December, and they bring quite different things, what you can do with them, yeah. So as per the previous videos I've done, what won't these units do? Yeah, so they won't survive. Yeah, they're toughness 3, 4+ save, 1 wound. They're a bit more survivable than battle line units at a 4+ save, but when things nasty look at them in the shooting phase, they will die, and if you get charged by anything serious, they will die in the preceding fight phase. They will not reliably destroy vehicles. Yeah, so melters, plasmas are great. They'll take out sort of light-skinned vehicles, but as soon as anything is a toughness 10 and upwards, it means you're wounding on 5s. So you can get all the hits you want, but wounding on 5s is absolutely terrible. But you may get lucky with a couple of melt hits, but they won't reliably destroy vehicles, particularly medium to heavy vehicles. They won't be screened out. What I mean by that is deep striking is certainly powerful, but if you're up against a cunning opponent, they will screen you out of the board. Yeah, most competitive, like mid to top players, will definitely screen you out effectively, and then obviously in the more casual setting, if your opponent's got loads of units, they may just do it organically. Yeah. Now, they won't always be within order range most of the time. What I mean by that is, typically if you've got, say, Lord Solar's blob, or Ursula Creed, or Colonel Strachan who's giving orders 24, depending where these models land on the tabletop, they may be out of order range, which means they need to operate independently. Now, what I mean by most of the time is obviously, if you've got the command squad blob, you've got the Tempestus Prime, he can give an order. Yeah, so you could give that unit an order, so basically you're mitigating that. One thing I failed to mention is, of course, you could give the Tempestus Prime the 15-point enhancement Grand Strategist, so you can give 2 orders. Now, another one, which is it's getting a bit more into the actual unit, is he could take instead of a shooter pistol, a command rod, and the unit he is leading can receive 2 orders. Yeah, so then you can basically make him hit on 2s with rapid fire 3, for example. Okay, so they won't have high OC. They're OC1, and this is really important to call out because compared to their battle line colleagues at OC2, that is very, very powerful. Yeah, so organically they're only OC1, but you can make them OC2. Yeah, they're a regimental unit, so you can obviously do that. Now, this is a key one. I do say this because I've been playing 40k now for 6 years, and only the last probably 6 months I feel like I've really hit my straps. I'm a slow learner, but I do feel once I learn something I know quite well, I don't think they're easy to use effectively, and I will explore that in a bit more sort of detail what I mean by that. But if you are struggling to use them effectively, you're new to 40k, don't feel bad. Deep strike sounds like it's easy, but actually you can just plonk them in the wrong spot, they die. But I will sort of talk through how to effectively use them. Okay, what will they do? So as said, they will survive more than battle line units. Now, there's 2 aspects to that. 4+ save is better than a 5+ save, obviously, but also given they're in deep strike, it simply means there's less chance of your opponent actually killing them if they're not on the tabletop, obviously. So you can't deep strike turn 1. Obviously, you can deep strike turn 2. You don't have to, and you have to deep strike all your stuff by turn 3. Broadly speaking. So with that simplistic mindset, not on the tabletop, the opponent can't shoot them, can't charge them, can't stab them, they can't be indirect, which means they can't be killed. So that's twofold. Now, they will reliably destroy most infantry targets. Anything light infantry, i.e. Astra Militarum infantry, will die, as in 5+ save. Pretty much all Space Marines will die, and even heavy infantry like heavy Primaris Space Marines, and also Custodes, where their 4+ invul save is nasty, but get enough dice into that save, it will fail. So with the right unit, and the right unit in this instance will be the 10-man Scion Squad with a 5-man command squad. And that's what will reliably delete pretty much most infantry targets. Yeah, obviously the Aquilons against light infantry, if you take the flamer for the sentry gun, fire that twice. That will reliably kill most light infantry. And also against infantry, the other key thing to never forget is currently in the index rules in December of 24, you get lethal hits into infantry, non-monsters, and vehicles. So again, into the right targets, these will remove units. Yeah. Now, this is also conceptual, is that you've got a once per game infinite move. Yeah, so what this obviously means is, given they've got deep strike, you can, in theory, arrive anywhere on the board. Obviously, need to be outside of 6 for the Aquilons, outside of 9 for the Tempestus Scions. But think about that. It's a very powerful mechanic, deep strike. If you put them on the board, if you did do that, and we'll cover that in deployment, you basically are removing their key rule, which is deep strike. So you should always have them in deep strike. There will be some exceptions, of course, if you're taking Tempestus Taurox Prime, the little tank, a very different sort of gameplay mechanic there. But do think here you have got basically the entire board to land on, respecting 9 inches and 6 inches. They can operate without orders. Yeah, my perspective on battle line units is they need orders to operate. They just need it, because that's where you actually squeeze the benefit out of OC3, plus 3-inch movement, +1 save, that type of thing. But given, Tempestus Aquilons, maybe less so, but they can basically movement block, they can shoot twice. Obviously, this one here gets 4 rerolls on objectives or reroll 1s, and they get sustained hits. And they can give orders, as they don't need to be within the 24-inch order bubble range of probably typically the command squad with Ursula Creed or Cadian Castellan issuing orders 24 inches around. But also, crucially, do think if they don't need orders to make them more effective to kill stuff, that's one less order you need to give them, which can go somewhere else in your army list on the tabletop. Cool. They will also counter deep strike and rapid ingress, and I'll get onto that in a second. Again, if your opponent's got some nasty stuff in deep strike, also you should be thinking about how do you effectively mitigate that as a threat. And we'll come to that with some examples in a moment. And lastly, again, a conceptual one is, they'll add a really dynamic element to your game, your army list. So if you just took a pure tank list, for example, or if you took 8 infantry squads and tanks, or 8 infantry squads and artillery, and you deploy them all on the board, basically the game is pretty set, yeah, because 6-inch movement infantry with +3 movement is so far. Tanks can only move 13 inches with move, and they've got to go around terrain. You basically, where you deploy them, pretty much dictates where they're going to spend the rest of their game. But obviously, deep strike means you can basically plonk stuff all over the place. And then we'll get onto things as we'll look in a second about sort of how you can shore up weaker sides of the board, how you can exploit weaker sides of your opponent's deployment, for example. But as I said, I think it does tie back here, is that to use it effectively, it isn't easy. Yeah, so again, if you're new to 40k, struggling to use this unit effectively, don't despair, because I struggled for a long time. Okay, so I'm now going to go to TTS. I'm going to do my best to sort of conceptualize some of this stuff, because some of it's a bit more, it's very situational to illustrate, and I'll do my best to show with how it looks like. So deployment, effective use of deep strike and rapid ingress, achieving actions, versus, I should actually change it to achieving secondary objectives versus movement block versus damage output, and effectively setting up for Overwatch. So I'm going to look at my notes as I go through this to keep me on track. So let's now go to Tabletop Simulator. Okay, so deployment. This will be quite quick. Yeah, so as I just sort of spoke to, and here I've got basically a fictitious deployment. I've got set up on Tabletop Simulator. Is basically an army list later on the tabletop. So don't focus too much on the units we've got here, but what you can see, I don't have the right models unfortunately for the Aquilons, is as I said before, basically all of my Tempestus units are off the board. So if for whatever reason you think it's necessary to put down some Scions, say, over here, as I said before, you've basically removed any reason to take this unit in inverted commas, yeah, because Deep Strike can't be done if you're on the tabletop. There are some units that can in the index, but not these units. If you're putting them on the tabletop, you basically remove the need to even have the unit in the first place. Now, beyond that, and that's pretty bloody basic sort of one I just called out there, is that how do you then basically ensure you can effectively Deep Strike? So this is going to be a bit more hard to illustrate on Tabletop Simulator. But from an overall game state point of view, are you basically forcing your opponent to lean into one side of the board or the other? So in this example here, yeah, we've got the deployment crucible of battle is, conceptually, I've put basically 2 tanks here, a Hellhound and a Chimera, and I've then got one other tank in Deep Strikers, in reinforcements as well. Will my opponent potentially, to counteract that threat, put more units over here? Let's say they do. Yeah, so by forcing my opponent to do that, then potentially this side of the board, again, this is conceptual, is weaker, is held weaker or has less units. That means I'm already starting before the game begins an opportunity to basically use Aquilons, the Death Blob over here, even 5-man to sort of exploit and really push my opponent on this side of the board. Now again, let's be a bit more dramatic and sort of bring it out in a bit more life. Yeah, so if we went basically all the tanks, let's pretend, yeah, I wouldn't recommend this, but if you put all your tanks over here, you put the Hellhound over here, and you put another tank over here, again, you're signaling to your opponent you're going to be bloody aggressive on this part of the board, yeah? So either they match you blow for blow, eye for eye, they put all their nasty stuff, and I've got, this is an old meta list, but back when Space Wolves just took Thunderwolf Cavalry Jail, which was awful to play against, is if they put 3 blobs of these guys here, okay, this is looking pretty nasty because they could basically bum rush you and charge you. But this is creating a scenario for effective use of your Aquilons, yeah? Because they could 6-inch Deep Strike, set up a nice big long movement block, and basically keep them in Aquilon jail and avoid them getting towards your tanks. But likewise, if this means they put all their nasty stuff on this side of the board and nothing over here, you've also then set up the opportunity to basically Deep Strike in maybe some Aquilons, a 5-man Scion squad, or the 15-man Death Blob to effectively destroy any units which try to get onto this objective. So this is definitely sort of a bit more sort of top level to think about, but how are you ensuring that you can actually Deep Strike and particularly rapid ingress units effectively? Now again, it's hard to illustrate, but as the game progresses, so let's pretend we've gone now into turn, let's just say we're in turn 2. If I turn off deployment, let me start game and turn off, start. Oh, this is not working. Okay, so let's pretend we're now into turn 2, and I've basically put loads of units. I put some jungle fighters over here. Just pretend I've got some jungle fighters up over here. And we know that my opponent is actually got a lot of units, and they could potentially screen out my Aquilons or my Scions. Is if I've got some jungle fighters holding this objective here, for example, do I basically sacrifice some gents here, charge them all the way out here to sort of try and actually form a counter screen for the other units I want to bring in from Deep Strike? Because if you don't push these gents out and your opponent gets quite close here, effectively that means they've got a screen of 6-inch here and obviously 9 inches as well here. So again, you could actually use your cheap units to counter screen and to create actual space for the Aquilons or Tempestus Scions to come down as well. So that's probably more conceptual as well, but do look out for how you actually allow to either create the opportunity for Deep Strike or to allow you to effectively Deep Strike by counter screening and counter movement blocking your opponent from basically turning off all your Deep Strike. So the last one here is I was very lucky to interview one of the top players for Astra Militarum recently, Nassim, and I saw him at a teams tournament about a month ago, and I think it was game one. I saw him walk around after about an hour and asked him, man, what did you do? And he basically tabled a poor old tower opponent because he put loads of stuff in deep strike, and then Nassim basically screened the entire board out and basically meant his opponent had nowhere to deep strike all the stuff in reinforcement. So if they can't deep strike within turn 3, they essentially all die. So it's a very extreme case, and obviously Nassim's one of the world's best players, but that sort of brings to life how nasty it can get, is if you get counter-screened and you can't deep strike, all the models you've got in deep strike, they're all dead. So a very nasty example, but it definitely happens. Okay, now let's look at then effectively using deep strike and rapid ingress. Okay, so again, we spoke about the overall board state. Now, again, if for example, this in this game here, your natural expansion objective is actually this one here, yeah, because you've got the right cover set up here to basically hold it effectively. But let's pretend you have pushed out some gents. They're over here. You've got some jungle fighters in there as well, an inch off the wall to hold the objective. But if you are worried about basically holding this objective, because maybe your opponent's got loads of nasty stuff here, so let's pretend they do have got some assault intercessors here. You've got the fly keyword. They've got a big blob of, say, Thunderwolf cavalry, which will actually munch everything, and you have effectively sort of movement blocked them with, say, some jungle fighters. But you're super worried about these blokes here, moving 12, charging the objective and killing all your dudes. Is do you basically deep strike 5-man squad of Tempestus Scions as a ring around the objective, ring around the posy, basically here. So when your opponent does, say, potentially charge into these jungle fighters, they all get massacred because they're going to murder them. At least you then have got 5 models, which you could make OC2 to then make sure you hold it in your turn, which comes around obviously after the charges occurred. So that's a very simple example of ensuring you can actually hold an objective. Now, one that's definitely a bit more advanced and requires really sort of careful consideration is the use of rapid ingress to steal objectives, hold objectives. Now, if we have got, now let's remove some models to make this less confusing because there's body parts everywhere. So let's pretend, it's I don't know, turn 3, yeah, and your opponent has done their movement phase and they've got some Thunderwolf cavalry dudes here. Yeah, they got the nasty blob here. And let's pretend this is the only unit which exists on the tabletop. Yeah, let's just pretend. Now, given they are, given the objective is over here, and for whatever reason they haven't put any models here, because if they put them there, they can then be shot. Yeah. Now, given their cavalry, they have to basically do a big old move. They've got to get out here, then go all there. Is if you want to be cheeky, you could actually deep strike. Rapid ingress, even just the 5-man Tempestus Scions squad here. Yeah, and all you need to do is put 1 model on the objective, and when it comes to your turn, you hold the objective. Now, again, this is like probably a relatively easy example because they have to basically charge around being cavalry. But let's also pretend, okay, let's use some fire breaches. Yeah, so let's pretend they're in there. Yeah. So if let's say your opponent's put them there. Okay, in this instance, you have to actually consider this would be an 8-inch charge for your opponent. Yeah, so that's, and in this instance you can't actually ingress here, yeah, because the current rules now is that you can only ingress 9 inches. So let's pretend, okay, so if that's the case, you can't ingress more than closer than 9 inches. Is that what you basically are factoring there is if this unit is 9 inches away, you're basically giving your opponent the opportunity, in this instance, to bang a 9-inch charge, yeah? So if you did do this play, you dropped them in here, and you're holding the objective with 1 model, you're basically saying to your opponent, do you value me scoring this objective in my turn when it comes around, or do you want to firstly attempt a 9-inch charge to get onto this objective and take it off me, hence exposing this unit to potential firepower next turn? And as I said, or are you prepared to just let me score the objective, yeah? Yeah, so this is definitely one I've used before. You need to watch out for it. You need to spot those opportunities. Now, again, over here, let's just pretend, and now this is a good example of where you wouldn't do it, is if, let's say, for example, your opponent's got these breaches here. They haven't been able to get onto the objective, but they are sat in the open here. is, in this example here, this would be a good opportunity to do it. But this is a good example of where you wouldn't do it, because if they haven't advanced, or if they've got advance and shoot, for example, and you do put them here, you're basically saying to your opponent, shoot my models. Yeah, so this is a pretty extreme example. Of course, I wouldn't recommend doing it all, but there could be scenarios, maybe, let's pretend it's only a 5-man squad of dudes, yeah? Maybe it's only a 5-man squad, and you decide to drop in, and I don't have the right models, but forgive me, these are Kazkin, but you do decide to drop in a 10-man blob of Aquilons, where basically you have the vast majority in cover. Yeah, so at least you're maximising their save, so you're going to have a 3+ save in cover. And given the Flamer can shoot upon deployment, at least you've got a chance of actually killing 1 or 2 models. So, if it's only a 5-man, and maybe they do have rapid-fire weapons and you kill 1, that suddenly means they've only got 8 models left, which means they're going to get, 4 models, they've got 8 shots left. And let's pretend they're wounding on 3s, you're saving on a 3. He's actually probably going to only lose, say, 4 models. Yeah, so you might not even have to battle shock, and in this instance, you actually are going to take that objective. So again, you need to obviously use a bit of common sense, which again for me has only sort of worked for me recently in my brain recently. Is you wouldn't do this scenario if there's 10 breaches who haven't advanced, they've got rapid fire weapons, which are AP, strength 5, AP 1 damage, and you plonk 5 models on the objective like that. You're asking to lose that unit. But as I said, if it's only 5 models, you come in with the Aquilons, they flamer, they kill 2 dudes, suddenly it's only 6 shots, they're not going to kill the unit or put it under half strength. That's a great way to basically take the objective for yourself. Yeah? Now, that's sort of a clever way to sort of steal objectives and use objectives. Now, another one, which again, you have to obviously spot it within the game, is maximising weaknesses in deployment or weaknesses in screen. Yes, I'm not going to paint a picture with a fictitious deployment, but where this will definitely sort of come true is low unit count armies. So custodies are a good one. Imperial Knights are an obvious one. But also, if you do take artillery, where are you creating that space for your Aquilons to come down and be quite cheeky? So let's pretend they've got, again, some breaches over here. Yeah? So, if your opponent has effectively screened them and basically put them out like that, so, there's at least a 9-inch screen, across the objective here. And if you have decided to take, for whatever reason, say some mortars, even 1 or 2 in some infantry squads, or if you're taking a basilisk, pretty nasty and tasty are you basically potentially, picking on them for the first 2 turns, so over the course of, say, 2 turns they've lost 4 models, and suddenly your opponent's ability to fully screen 9-inch and obviously 6-inch is removed, yeah? So in this instance, and this definitely is less spicy than when it was a 3-inch deep strike with Aquilons, is if you basically are dropping in, because I would definitely say screening out 6-inch, it's very, very hard. Screening out 3-inch deep strike was impossible. 6-inch is probably a bit easier, but it's definitely not as easy as 9, obviously. Are you creating opportunities with your other assets to basically, maximise the opportunity to remove stuff off the objective? Yeah. So in this instance, if all your opponent is holding their backfield objective with is these fire warriors, they've lost 4, you come down with the Aquilon 6 inches away, 6 inches away here. You could use the flamer or the hotshot volley gun or grenade launcher when it lands to basically remove a model and then obviously shoot again. Is you could basically delete the right units, potentially off the objective. And crucially, this basically means your opponent is not scoring their home objective. Yeah, so you can obviously also create scenarios for effective deep strike through the overall game state. Again, fictitious example, but if you sort of, you put 4 tanks on this side of the deployment zone, and suddenly you've got 4 tanks, rushing up this side of the board, and your opponent starts to allocate more resources and start to pull resources this way, you're basically creating gaps over here, where you can basically come in, pick on a weak unit, pick on an action unit, or steal objectives. Yeah, so that's definitely one to sort of look for. Now, as I said earlier, is, to basically make sure that you're reinforcing weak objectives. Yeah. So if again you're worried about losing an objective, is you could either deep strike or rapid ingress in your opponent's turn, as I showed it before, to basically shore up objectives. Yeah. Okay. Now on to using to achieve actions, do actions, achieve secondaries, movement block, and damage output. Now, this definitely relates to the unit type you use. Yes, if we just get these again is some fictitious ones. So we've got the 5-man. The 5-man unit, we've got the 10-man Mega Blob, the 15-man Death Blob, and then some Aquilons. Now, depending on your list archetype, I would say Aquilons and a 5-man unit are basically prime candidates for achieving secondary objectives which require you to be in certain parts of the board. So the best example I can think of is behind enemy lines, and also deploy locus, where you get 4 points. The second objective for being in your opponent's deployment zone and completing an action which goes off straight away. So again, allowing this to happen, so 6-inch deep strike is pretty hard to screen. I would say most of the time you should be able to get this into your opponent's deployment zone and basically perform an action or do behind enemy lines, or maximize, for example, engage all fronts here, because obviously engage all fronts in this deployment, in this map layout, you're going to be in this part of the board easy, this table quarter. You'll definitely be here. There's easy ways to get there, but it's typically harder to get units here. So you could definitely get, probably a 5-man of Scions here, or a 6-man there, and likewise also dudes over here as well. So do look out for that, is scoring those secondary objectives. Now the next one is in movement blocking. So this really is where the Aquilons come into the picture. Now, as I said, in the pre-balance status that we just had in mid-December, is previously they could 3-inch deep strike and they could also 3-inch rapid ingress. Now this was disgusting to play into for your opponents. That has all been removed. So now they can 6-inch deep strike, but they can only 9-inch rapid ingress. Yeah, so a 9-inch rapid ingress for movement block is way less effective than a 3 or even a 6-inch deep strike rapid ingress. However, still within your turn when you deep strike, again, if we go back to the example of this super tasty combination of the Thunder with cavalry, is given these have got the cavalry key where they can't travel through terrain, is even a 6-inch ingress here or deep strike here, you can basically plonk them there, and this basically means your opponent can't move this way, obviously, yeah? Now, I covered it in the battle line unit review as well, but this will definitely have a lot of play against multiple different units, because even if it was against, say, our favourite bunch of fire warriors, which you don't want to move through, let's say over here for whatever reason, is you basically put them as a line here, yeah, outside of 6 inches. They obviously can move and shoot you, but they can't move any further. And where this obviously is most effective is, let's pretend this is a super aggressive bunch of charging units, is that if you want to hold this objective here, you've got, say, 5 dudes over here, and then we'll hold this objective. Obviously, if they're a charging unit, they come out 6. They might do a bit of shooting, but all they can do is basically charge into this unit here. They'll kill the Aquilons. There goes 110 points. But then they can't effectively get onto this unit here within that turn. They've got obviously, absorb some firepower from you. So movement blocking definitely is something the Aquilons can do very effectively. Obviously against vehicles, it's beautiful, ground-based vehicles, even fly-based vehicles, and also Titanic units which can move over your models. So let's just pretend this is a Wraith Knight, yeah? Let's pretend it's just, this model here is a Wraith Knight. And I actually used this in a tournament recently. Is if it can move 12 inches, yeah, you basically be quite clever and be quite sneaky. Let's just make sure that's 6. And you basically deploy them in a way that it doesn't matter where they go, because their base is so massive, they can't actually land anywhere, because, if they move 12, yeah, if they move their maximum and their base is massive, they'll actually be finishing on top of one of your miniatures, which means it's an illegal move, yeah? So against, obviously if it's against a Lehman Russ, or even say, let's say a Chimera here, it basically means that Stucker can't move anywhere. If it's a fly model, likewise with a Titanic model, which can walk over miniatures, you just have to basically measure its maximum move and basically sort of plonk in a very sort of, a bit of Tetris here, that if this model moves 12, Yeah, and you want to protect this objective here. It could go there, but it's going to make it quite hard to basically go its full move, yeah. So you have to sort of mess around with that. It will take a bit of practice to make sure you can maximise that. But the movement block with the Aquilons is still very effective. Yeah, definitely, even within your turn. Now, damage output. Now, this is obviously where the Mega Blob comes into play. And I would say this is a very high-risk move because if you don't delete whatever you're shooting at, you're typically going to die. Like, this blob will die. Because obviously they're a 4+ save, 1 wound, toughness 3. Without the med pack, they've got no feel, no pain. But the use of this unit, you want to make sure whatever you're going into aggressively is worthy of their consideration, in inverted commas, and you've got a very good chance of killing them. So, firstly, where you want to be basically doing it is onto units on an objective, yeah, because getting full rerolls with sustained and lethals is absolutely tasty. You'll definitely roll a lot of 6s, you'll definitely get lethals and sustained, and you will delete most infantry in the game. So let's just talk about what's worthy of consideration. So, okay, this is probably not the best example. Well, it is actually, because let's pretend in this game state, your opponent, you sucked up all their resources, you're sort of fighting it out of here, and they're getting quite worried about you pushing tanks onto the objective. So they put a load of Riptides over here, you're having a massive shootout, and, you know, in this game, it's hold 1, hold more, for example, or hold 1, hold 2, hold 3. All they're holding this objective with is Fire Warriors here. Now, this unit, I'm thinking, is about 100 points. This is 170 points. So if you plonk them here, they are going to absolutely guarantee destroy 10 breaches. You're going to delete them off the tabletop. So in this instance here, it is worthy of consideration because it basically removes your opponent's scoring. But at 100 points, you're not trading up, and that's something you'll often hear a lot of players say: ability to trade up. Now, let's pretend, I don't have the miniatures obviously, but let's just grab some other miniatures. I can't think of any to represent, but let's just pretend these dudes here is a bunch of Custodian Guardians with Draxus, the Inquisitor. Yeah, so that's going to be a lot of points. Yeah, and that's holding the objective. They're 6 up. They're toughness 6, 3 wounds, 2+ save, 4+ invul save. They probably can use stratagems to make them more effective and more survivable. This unit should remove them because it's got lethals and sustained. But basically trading off 190 points it is now, 190 points for the removal of some Custodian Guardians and also Inquisitor Draxus is a very good use of their basically their data sheet, yeah. Now, then, of course, in this fictitious example, your opponent isn't going to let you basically get an easy 9-inch rapid ingress or 9-inch deep strike over here, yeah. So this is where rapid ingress could be one to consider. Now, against Custodian Guardians is actually pretty tasty, and I'm trying to think how I actually would manage this one here, but let's just pretend this is all that exists on the tabletop right now, is these 6 miniatures and this massive blob. So an effective use of rapid ingress would actually be to basically put them in here, for example. So if we're worried about getting charged, because your opponent could basically get in here and get in the mix-up, is you basically measure out 12, or even 11.5 if you want to sort of risk it, or even 11, because 11-inch charge is absolutely terrible odds. But you basically measure out 12 inches, which obviously is respecting the 9-inch ingress rule, and basically plonk them in there, yeah. So, again, in this little narrow universe, that's Tabletop Simulator. In this example, I rapid ingress them outside of 12 inches, and then basically in your turn, you can give them you could potentially, I think you might have to give them move. Oh no, they can move. Yeah, let's just say they don't need move. You then give them the order rapid fire 3. And suddenly these poor old Guardians are going to cop a gazillion shots into the face. Now, obviously, that's a very limited scenario, but of course, if your opponent has advanced the unit onto the objective and they don't have advance and charge, you could also then basically put the this mega blob outside of 9 inches here, outside of any direct line shooting, and then given, if you say, let's pretend you can't get all of them to shoot, you then give them the order move. You've got a 9-inch move. and suddenly you've got all of the boys staring at these Custodian Guardians as well. So that's definitely the way to think about it. Is your opponent has advanced onto the objective and they can't charge, come in 9 inches, no sweat, don't have to worry about it. Likewise, if they can't shoot and advance, so again, pretty bad. This wouldn't happen in most games, but if they've advanced onto the objective, you could deep strike over here. Basically, then they're just staring at you and they can't do anything because they've advanced. They can't shoot. Likewise, they can't charge. But also, if they can charge or shoot, then of course maximise terrain, or even. You could basically sort of be okay to take a couple of shots because, as per what I said with the Fire Warriors, is if you're going to get shot by 5 models and you're confident you won't lose a lot of dudes, is maybe you're happy to take a couple of casualties in doing so. So that's how to basically, use the Death Blob. The one watch out with the Death Blob is it's a very large footprint. You can be easily screened out. And something else I haven't said yet is that in the current meta of 40k, a lot of players will take a 12-inch deep strike denial tool, and that's typically via a character. So, for example, Astra Militarum, you've got it from the regimental attaches from the Navigator or whatever it's called, the Astropath, 12-inch deep strike denial. There's quite a few units out there which can do that, and your opponent could either lock down the home objective with a 12-inch deep strike denial, or move it up the board and basically, remove that. So that's also an effective way to basically turn off deep strike. But as I said, 15 models is a lot harder to get into lots of places than a 5-inch model, 5 models, and likewise also 10 models for the Aquilons, which have got a 6-inch rapid deep strike. Right, then lastly on the Death Blob is effectively setting up Overwatch. Yeah, so Overwatch is definitely something you want to be using quite sparingly, and only typically when it's infantry into non-monsters and vehicles for lethal hits, and likewise vehicles into vehicles and monsters, because every 6 you get on the hit roll is a lethal hit. Now obviously with the Mega Blob with the command squad, is every 6 is a lethal hit and a sustain. So basically you pick up the lethals, put them in a separate pile, you pick up some more dice and basically roll those to wound. And given you've got reroll 1s or full rerolls on an objective, you will definitely get a load of hits. So this is, again, hard to conceptualize on Tabletop Simulator, but if pretend you've put down the Mega Blob over here, let's say, okay, you've come down, you've removed a bunch of dudes, in your turn they've been massacred, and then your opponent's got more models, over here, for example, and given they need to basically move across the objective, they begin or end the move, and basically they will say they move onto the objective here. Either you decide to overwatch them in their movement phase or overwatch them in their charge phase. It's given the units on the objective, full rerolls will definitely basically delete a lot of stuff. From my experience against, say, Space Marines, you'll probably kill at least, you could kill all 5 if it's a 5-man squad. I've definitely killed 5-man squads. Against 3-win models, we'll kill at least probably 3, but against things like maybe Custodian Guardians, you'll kill maybe 1 or 2 if you're lucky. But do basically look out for those opportunities to basically, ingress them outside 9, come in and shoot something, quite tasty, basically be sat threatening an objective. So if your opponent moves across the objectives, moves onto the objectives, you can threaten a very nasty Overwatch because, rapid fire 3 plasma guns is 3 shots. You've got 3 melters, you've got a grenade launcher, you've got a hot shot volley gun, then you've got 5 hot shot las guns with 15 shots each. Is you will basically definitely delete some stuff. Cool, so let's just check the time. We've been chatting with 40 minutes. Okay, so let's wrap this up. Let's now get on to the summary of the key points. Okay, so basically, in the current index, this may all change. We've got a codex coming in the early part of 2025, is that they add a significant degree of dynamic play to your Astra Militarum list. Yeah, so as I said, if you take a pure sort of standard traditional guard list of infantry and tanks, you deploy them all on the board. Where they are on the board is where they pretty much will spend the rest of the game, within reason, yeah? You bring deep strike, be it 6-inch or 9-inch, you basically can have got a once per game movement everywhere on the board, obviously. Now, then obviously think about what are you choosing a unit for? Are they there to achieve secondaries? to shore up objectives? Are they there to do damage? Or are they there to do mission play, which actually, let's just say movement block to make it a bit clearer what I mean by that. So are you basically using, say, Aquilons, to basically control where your opponent goes, either with their monsters and vehicles, their fly units, or even sort of just control the overall positioning of their units? And definitely, and this is easy for me to say and write it down, is you want to be mastering Deep Strike and Rapid Ingress. Now, I did my best to sort of explain it on Tabletop Simulator, but this, as I said, reflecting now over the course of my progression as a player is, I used to just deep strike the dudes 9 inches off, stuff and just try and shoot stuff and that type of thing, but really using them effectively requires you to basically think, what can they not only destroy, but what can they score? Yeah, and that obviously ties in, if you're beginning, just think, how can I basically use a 5-man Scion squad or some Aquilons to be maximising secondaries? Yeah, because a lot of secondaries will pay you victory points in being in certain parts of the board, being just physically alive there, or doing actions there. Or also, do you basically think about how you basically ensure you're scoring your primary? Yeah, so that's going to be obviously, as I said in that example, if you think you can't hold an objective because you're going to get charged by some units, Rapid Ingress 5 models on there to make sure at least you've got some models on there after the other dudes have been killed by charging units. And Rapid Ingress, it's a very powerful stratagem. It has only been around for 10th edition. Didn't exist in 8th or 9th edition. It's a new thing. But I do think here, basically it's allowing you to get extra movement, yeah? Because if you deep strike a model, needs to be outside of 9, and beyond charging into units, that will be a 9-inch charge. When you come in from deep strike, you can't do any movement beyond that, yeah? But if you Rapid Ingress your opponent's turn, you've then got your turn to move and do more movement, yeah? So that's it. So hopefully this has been helpful. Let me know in the comments any questions or feedback on this style of video. How do you effectively use Tempestus units? This is more from the conceptual point of view. I don't want to hear about like any wild combinations out there. Like I know for example, you could put maybe a Primaris Psyker with a command squad for the leaf with the sustained hits. That's not what this is about. It's more conceptually using the unit overall. But yeah, let me know how you found this format. Is it helpful? I think this one's a bit more conceptual because to basically sort of use them, it requires you to look for particular scenarios in the game, but hopefully it has been helpful to you, the audience. So I'll definitely do more of these videos. I'm going to do Living Rust Battle Tanks next. And the key thing here is that I want this sort of format to work forever. So when we get the new codex in February or January next year, regardless of what the rules are, indexes change, the data sheets change, the points change, is using Deep Strike requires you to think more top level about what the unit is doing and what it can do for the game overall. So cool, so thank you for your attention. If you enjoyed the video and want to support me, you can do so with a like, comment, or by subscribing, joining my Patreon Platoon, or becoming a channel member. As said, I'm a true variety hunter for Astra Militarum content, covering everything from the lore. I often draw my military experience. I was in the Australian Army for 8 years as a rifleman to give a bit of a unique perspective on Astra Militarum lore. Tabletop tactics, just like this video here, and also building, assembling, unboxing videos for any kits that come out, and also painting and assembly. So massive thanks to my current supporters, be it the patrons and also channel members. Let's get your bayonet sharp, las gun oiled. Faith from the Emperor strong. Patreon Platoon, sound off.
Tank Commander Glenn, Tank Commander Mitchell, Tank Commander Watchdog Van Etten, Lieutenant Burke Nielsen, Lieutenant Smith, Colour Sergeant DuPont, Sergeants Adal, Scott, the Colonel Merrill, Veteran Gibson, Hall, Lundeen, Guardsman Beard, Coquelin, Easing, Wood, Hills, Malik, Nitton, Nguyen, Tompkin, Conscript England, Evan Gunn, Goodwin, Honorary Members Bolgram King, Psyche Smith, Tempestus Scions Gaylard.